Welcome to Buffalo Pregame, your source for live Buffalo football discussion, news, analysis, opinions, and more. Presented by ASM Publications and Bills Digest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Buffalo Pregame. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for ASM Publications and Bills Digest. On tonight's show, we dive into a preview of the Bills' Week 2 matchup with the New York Jets. What are the top storylines? A couple players to watch. Also, a score prediction for Sunday's game. A Sunday 1 p.m. game for the Buffalo Bills, which the fans have kind of grown accustomed to shifting from over the past few years with all the primetime matchups and 4 p.m. Sunday matchups, this, that, and the other thing. But back to being kind of the norm this week as we do get indeed a Sunday 1 p.m. matchup between the Bills and Jets at MetLife Stadium. I picked against the Bills in week 1, but things might be different this time around. You'll have to stay tuned to the end of the show to hear my official prediction. But each week on Buffalo Pregame, I'll provide updates on the NFL, NHL, and more via daily articles, podcasts, videos, and more. Please subscribe to Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, along with Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on Substack, both of which are free of charge. Also, head on over to the YouTube app or wherever you're listening. And please hit that like button. Give us a rating on the audio side. It would really mean the world to me. All right, let's get into it. Let's start this episode by simply stating that coming off the high of a comeback victory, this isn't a common thought, but the Bills need to bounce back in this game. They left a lot to be desired in that win over the Ravens on both sides of the ball, really. You look at the slow start from the offense, and you look at the way that the defense really struggled up until the end. I don't think the offense was aggressive enough to start the game. You saw things come alive in the fourth quarter with Josh Allen really taking it upon himself to carry this team to victory. But Joe Brady needs to let Josh Allen go in this game early against the tough Jets defensive front that really made it tough on the Steelers running game a week ago. And then if you look at the defensive side of the ball, pretty much everything went wrong up until a few stops at the end of the game. So plenty to improve on that side of the ball. We'll get into some specifics later on in the episode. But just all in all, need a better effort from both sides of the ball. I think maybe a couple of changes in terms of how the team came out offensively and really grand scope changes for the defense as just plenty of holes to plug and, like I said, changes to make on that side of the ball. But that's where we'll start up front along the defensive line. And without Ed Oliver for what is expected to be multiple weeks, according to Adam Schefter, Zion Logue called up from the practice squad on Saturday. Looks like he'll get maybe, I would say, 10 to 25% of the snaps come Sunday afternoon. And you also had rookie linebacker Keontae Jenkins, who will likely replace an injured Shaq Thompson in this game. Both of those players called up from the practice squad. But with Oliver out, the microscope really dials in even closer on this unit. You do have TJ Sanders and Deon Walker, the two rookies who were drafted to really make an impact early and often for the Bills this year. But you saw a little bit of struggles from both players in week 1, and that's to be expected, transitioning to a new level. And you heard it from Sean McDermott during this week of practice say how this is the varsity now. It's tough to play in the SEC, but the NFL is an entirely different level. And I think you saw some of those rookie jitters and maybe some rookie growing pains for both of those players in week 1, but they're going to be called upon. I think they both played right around 25% of the snaps last week, if I'm correct. I think it was about here. I'll find it for you, but they're really going to be thrown into the fire this week. I think the team wanted to take things slowly with both of those players as the Bills really relied heavily upon Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones in that week 1 matchup. But they're not going to be able to do that in week 2 with Ed Oliver out. Both of those players are going to be called upon to increase their snap share. And you had 25% of the snaps for Deon Walker in week 1, 31% of the snaps for TJ Sanders, while Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver each played 69% of the snaps in week 1. So I think you're going to see a considerable jump for both TJ Sanders and Deon Walker. The question is, how much will we see Zion Logue play? Like I said, I'm kind of pegging him for 10 to 15, 20% of the snaps, I think. This is a Jets offense that ran the ball more than all but one team in the league in week one, and that's what Zion Logue brings to the table for the Buffalo Bills. He brings that potential run stuff ability, while you have TJ Sanders and Deion Walker more adept at the pass rushing element of the game up front. So perhaps you see Zion Logue a little bit on early downs, and then you're going to see a heavy dose of TJ Sanders and Deion Walker next to Daquan Jones, or perhaps together out there on pass rushing downs. But this is a Jets offense that, like I said, they like to run the ball. Breece Hall and Justin Fields, both threats to use their legs out of the backfield. Hall, 19 for 107, averaged 5.6 yards per carry against the Steelers last week. Justin Fields carried the ball 12 times for 48 yards, also scored a couple of rushing touchdowns. So it's not only the ball carriers for the New York Jets either. The offensive line really put things together in week one. It hasn't always been a strength for the Jets over the years, the offensive line, but they have some continuity on the inside. And then rookie right tackle Armand Membu was just incredible in week one, lined up against all-pro pass rusher TJ Watt. And Membu on the field for 26 pass blocking snaps this past week. Didn't allow a pressure, a QB hit, or a sack for the Jets. And he also helped pave the way for what was an 8-yard rushing touchdown for Breece Hall in the second quarter. So expect Greg Rousseau, I think, to be lined up plenty against Membo this week. And Rousseau didn't have as impactful of a game as I think he would like to have against the Ravens. So he'll be looking to bounce back a little bit, and really a tough matchup against the rookie, who was one of the best offensive linemen across the league in week one. I think he was perhaps Pro Football Focus's top rated or graded, I should say, offensive lineman. And I don't put too much stock into those grades, but at the same time, you heard plenty of rave reviews for the rookie. And he really spearheaded, like I said, a kind of transcendent performance for this group up front, and it helped the Jets score a boatload of points against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you're also going to be looking for a little bit more from Joey Bosa in this game. Got his feet wet with the Bills in game one. Let's see a sack, a few more pressures, maybe some increased impact in the running game as well for Bosa. Neither he nor or Rousseau had a bad game against the Ravens, but with Ed Oliver out, you really need those two veterans to be the spark for your team up front, because Daquan Jones just doesn't seem to have it at this point. One tackle last week, despite playing, like I said, 69% of the snaps. I think he made a couple of nice plays, maybe opening things up for others throughout the course of the game, but I think you need more impact from Daquan Jones in this one as well, but I'm just not so sure you're going to get it. So rely on those two edge guys, Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa. Maybe they can solve this Jets offensive line that had a nice week one, but just not so sure how much you can depend on Daquan Jones. And then the rookies as well. It's kind of a crapshoot what you're going to get from them in an increased workload. And they might need a few games to settle in, both TJ Sanders and Deion Walker, as I mentioned before. Maybe that's expedited as it has been out of necessity with the result of Oliver's injury. But they'll be thrown into the deep end this week, and let's see if Deion Walker and TJ Sanders sink or swim. But like I said, I put Logue out there pretty often on early downs, and then TJ Sanders and Deion Walker on clear passing downs, perhaps when you build that lead early in the game, and then you allow those two to feast in the second half when the Jets perhaps are forced to go to more of a pass-heavy offense, which isn't their identity. They like to run the football. They like to ride that running game, ground and pound. But I think if you get off to a fast start in this game with Josh Allen, you can really take them out of their element, and that could perhaps open the door for Sanders and Walker to make an impact like they want to heading into this game. But it's critical that the D-line improves and helps open things up for the Bills defenders at the second level, which the front four really struggled to do last week. And I don't want to take all the accountability off of Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, but with the mess that's created up front with the defensive line struggling to get off blocks and really allowing those or eat up blocks, I should say, and allowing those defenders or offensive linemen, to get to the second level and lay hands on the Bills defenders and Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, who really didn't have much room to work. And now with the defensive line undermanned, things become even more tricky in week 2. But it's tough for linebackers to make an impact on the game when the defensive line is really not opening things up and not allowing that second level to operate cleanly all day long. And that's what happens. It happened against the Ravens, and we'll see if that group can get it turned around and maybe, like I said, open the door for an increased impact for Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard in this game. And we have a few comments here. One from Carl Knight. How serious is Shaq Thompson's injury since they elevated a linebacker from the practice squad? I would imagine he'll be out in this game, but let's review the injury report here. I believe he had returned to practice at the end of last week or this week in some capacity. Let's see. Shaq Thompson, yeah, he was limited on Thursday and Friday, so I don't think it's going to be anything long-term with him. But obviously with Keontae Jenkins elevation, I should say, from the practice squad, I would expect Shaq Thompson will miss this game. I was hoping you'd see Jimmy Charlo elevated from the practice squad. He was really a preseason favorite, came on as one of the stars of HBO's Hard Knocks, but that was not to be. Instead, they go with another rookie in Keontae Jenkins in this one. And we have a comment from Artemio Marifosk. Philippines Bills Mafia, awake later, 1 to 4 a.m. Monday Asia Pacific moments to enjoy watching Superman Josh and Captain America Tyrell, maybe Terrell, I'm not sure, beat Fields and stop their runs. And we have Artemio picking Buffalo 39, New York 29. Focus and teamwork on the road. I like that prediction, Artemio. We'll have to get to mine later. I think we have the same scoring margin, but a different final score in that one. But beyond Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, I think probably the position group, and this comes as no surprise, under the most pressure in this game is the safety group, and particularly Taylor Rapp. Rapp was expected to be really the rock of this back end of the Bills defense, with also Christian Benford on the outside at cornerback. But at that safety position, with Cole Bishop still kind of meandering his way into the swing of things and really coming on slowly for the Bills and looking a bit out of his depth at times, you were expecting Taylor Rapp to follow up what was really a productive 2024 season, but he didn't do that in week 1, took some bad angles on a couple of Ravens running plays, allowed Baltimore to get out and turn what I thought could have been maybe 10-yard gains, 15-yard gains into even longer. So Rapp really struggled in week 1. You need to see him bounce back. And then Cole Bishop, you need to see some steps from him at some point, or it's really going to call back into question why this team didn't bolster that position group this offseason. You brought in Derek Forrest. He didn't latch on, similar to Mike Edwards last year, and you put all your chips on Cole Bishop, and he just has not given you the return that you're looking for. It's only 1 week into the season. Still a long way to go. The Bills' schedule lightens up here with not as talented of quarterbacks as Lamar Jackson. So maybe a chance for Cole Bishop to get his feet under him, and you really need to see that bounce back from Taylor Rapp to lead those two on the back end. So a lot of pressure on the Bills' defense in this one, both, or really all three, up front at that second level with the linebackers, and then at the back end with the safety group. So the Bills should have a much less challenging matchup in the secondary. All the Jets really have at wide receiver is Garrett Wilson. He's still a significant threat with Justin Fields, who really came on strong in week 1. But beyond that, number 2 wide receiver Josh Reynolds is out with an ankle injury, and rookie tight end Mason Taylor dealing with an ankle injury as well. But he's questionable, Taylor. I believe he'll play in this one. But beyond Wilson, it's really the first-year pro, and then maybe Alan Lazard, who was inactive last week. I think he had I can't remember what injury it was, but he sustained an injury during the preseason, kept him out a couple of weeks. I want to say shoulder injury for Alan Lazard, and that left him inactive in week 1, but I would expect him to be active in week 2, and really it'd be Taylor, Lazard, and Garrett Wilson as the top 3 threats in this passing game. And then, of course, whatever they have to offer coming out of the backfield. But still not sure who will get the start at cornerback for the Bills. I think Trey White is ready. I think Trey White thinks he's ready, but I'm not so sure the Bills are going to put him out there with a short week leading into next week's Thursday night matchup with the Dolphins. Then again, that would be a tough matchup for White to come in and begin his quote-unquote comeback with Tyreek Hill, who hasn't caught a deep ball from Tua Tagovailoa in quite some time, but he and Jalen Waddle, with the speed that they offer at the wide receiver position, and then you look at a player like Tre'Davious White, who's had some of his speed and athleticism sapped due to injury over the years. I'm not so sure that's how you want to throw him into the fire on the outside at cornerback. Maybe you'd like to see him with an easier matchup against the Jets, but then again, that quick turnaround with a groin injury makes it a bit of a tricky situation for the Bills. So very interested to see how they approach that with Trey White and then Dorian Strong, the rookie, who got the start for the Bills in week 1. So that will be something to monitor heading into inactives when they're released at 11:30 tomorrow morning. All right, let's pause for a moment. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Head on over to the YouTube app. Hit that like button. Subscribe as well. Share this with your friends. If you're watching on X, please hit that retweet button or like this post as well. And then on the audio side, please give us a rating. Please share also in your group text or wherever you can to help spread the word for Buffalo Pregame as we really get into the heart of the Bills' regular season in the weeks to come. But let's flip things around. Let's dive into the matchup facing the Bills' offense in this game. And I think if you're the Bills, you have to attack this team through the air. I know that Ray Davis in the early season matchup last year really ran well. I believe he was close to 100 yards in that game, subbing in for an injured James Cook. But if you look at the way the Jets played defense in week 1 and how they sold out to stop that Steelers run and really did so successfully, I think if you're the Bills, you have to get things cooking through the air. Cornerback Sauce Gardner does appear set to play. There was some question about that early in the week. The Jets' top cornerback worked through a groin injury. But beyond Gardner, there really isn't much to write home about when you look at the Jets' secondary. Gardner could travel with Keon Coleman on Sunday, which would make things admittedly difficult on the second-year wide receiver. But then again, if Coleman's going to take that step that everyone's looking for him to take this year and become a true problem for opposing defenses, he really needs to be able to do it against the best of the best. And if Gardner does indeed shadow him throughout this game, what an opportunity for Coleman to prove that. He proved his worth last week with a 100-yard game, a career-high 8 receptions. So I'll be interested to see if Coleman can provide an encore no matter who he's lined up against in this game. If he lines up against Brandon Stevens, the Jets' other starting cornerback, that's a matchup I could see Coleman really feasting on. Stevens plays, like I said, opposite Sauce Gardner in that defense and really struggled last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Jets made 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers look like Joe Montana in his prime, and Stevens' struggles were a big factor in that. And as I mentioned before, I'd like to see Joe Brady and the offensive staff open things up early from snap one. The worst thing you can do in a potential trap game, as I've heard people term this one on social media, the worst thing you can do in a game like this is give a team like the Jets hope. And you really have to take their heart early in the game. If you try to ease into things like you did last week and let a team like this hang around, who knows what happens in the second half against the team adept at running the football. So take this game, take their heart early with a heavy dose of Josh Allen out of the gate. You saw what he's capable of against a talented secondary in the Ravens last week, and it's not as daunting of a matchup in terms of the Jets coverage unit this week. I'd like to see Elijah Moore maybe implemented in this game, used as an extension of the running game. And then you have Khalil Shakir also one more week removed from that high ankle sprain that thwarted his progress early in the preseason. So I think the short passing game becomes increasingly important in this game. I think it can, like I said, be an extension of that running game and then open up some deep shots to Coleman down the field and Kincaid down the seam as well. So like I said, Ray Davis did have that big game against the Jets early in the season, but the Bills struggled to run the ball in the two teams' second matchup of the season. James Cook held to, I believe, about 50 yards in that game. I think the Bills were held under 4 yards per carry. So, and then this past week against Pittsburgh, as I'm looking at my notes, 20 carries for 53 yards against the Steelers. That's what they held the Steelers to, I should say, in week 1. So Quinnen Williams, one of the strongest defensive tackles in the league. And you heard, interestingly, on New York sports radio that Jerry Jones tried to dial up a trade between the Cowboys and the Jets for Micah Parsons and tried to get Quinnen Williams and a couple of draft picks in return. And the Jets weren't willing to move on from a talent like Quinnen Williams. So he's really one of the best defenders in the NFL. And the Jets also added former Bills defensive tackle Harrison Phillips with the whole hopes of bolstering their run defense. And Phillips didn't have the best game in week 1, and self-admittedly, he spoke to the media, said he hoped that was his worst game of the year, and you can bet your bottom dollar he'll be chomping at the bit to improve this week against his former team. And then on the edge of the Jets' front four, you have 2 former first-round picks, Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson. McDonald had 10.5 sacks last season. Johnson's dealt with some injuries, had an Achilles injury, I believe, last year, but he returned in week 1 and will be out there once again for the Jets in week 2. So this is as talented a front four as the Bills will see this season. And then at linebacker, Quincy Williams is a really talented player at the second level. So the game plan for me would be get the ball out of Josh Allen's hands quickly, keep the pressure off him, and allow this pass game to spread its wings. And that's what I wanted to see from it last week after such a sluggish start, but it took him a while to take the training wheels off. I don't think he can take them as long to do that this week. You really have to let Josh Allen roll. And that's my advice for what it's worth for Joe Brady and the Bills offensive staff. But once again, please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Go to the YouTube channel. Hit that like button. If you're listening on the audio side, give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's wrap things up. A quick show here on this Saturday night. The Bills are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Weather is expected to be perfect, about 80 degrees, no precipitation or wind. So that should allow Josh Allen and the Bills passing game to really operate successfully. And I've mentioned it enough, but that is what I'm expecting in this game. I really want to see the passing game featured in this one and maybe go beyond those top 3 to 4 targets, allowing Elijah Moore and some others to contribute in this game as well. But CBS is sending its top broadcast crew to MetLife Stadium for this one. You'll hear Jim Nantz, you'll hear Tony Romo, you'll hear Tracy Wolfson on the call as Carl Knight is predicting an interception from either Taron Johnson or Dorian Strong, and Jim Page is predicting Jets 27, Bills 24. I'll give you my prediction coming up in a few minutes. But Taron Johnson, as Carl Knight said, as he's calling his shot, he believes Dorian Strong will be out there as the team's starter at cornerback. But Taron Johnson worked through a quad injury this week. That's more good news for the Bills, as they will indeed have their starting nickel cornerback in this game against the New York Jets. But prediction time. I picked against the Bills last week, and I thought I was onto something for the first 3 quarters, but after Josh Allen's heroic comeback, I kind of regretted it a little bit. But in this one, give me the Bills to win 27-17, as I predicted for Buffalo Bills on SI on Friday. As I felt a little tickle in my throat, had to wet the whistle a little bit. But I don't think Allen and the Bills passing game will have any trouble moving the ball through the air against the Jets, as I've mentioned. So another 300-plus yard passing day, in my opinion, on the way for Josh Allen. And there's been a lot of talk about the Jets giving Josh Allen and the Bills trouble throughout Allen's career, but Allen is an impressive 9-4 against the Jets during his career. He's averaged 226.8 passing yards per game, 41 rushing yards per game. He's scored 24 touchdowns in those 13 matchups. Turnovers have hurt him over the course of this AFC East matchup. He's turned the ball over 11 times in those 13 matchups, but these past 2 years, we've seen a different Josh Allen. He's really reeled in that turnover problem, if you want to call it that. So give me the Bills to roll in this one. One thing I am interested in seeing in this game is new punter Cameron Johnston, and if he can be a little bit better than Brad Robbins was last week, which should not be hard. And also his chemistry with Matt Prater in the kicking game. Things went well last week with Robbins and Prater, so interested to see if Johnson can pick up on that page as well. But this is the first time the Bills have played the Jets under head coach Aaron Glenn. They had experience going against his defense in Detroit, but he has some really talented pieces in New York, particularly up front, as we previously discussed. So a little bit more, I think, at Glenn's disposal in the Jets. And I wonder if there will be a feeling out process for Joe Brady and company with this new look Jets defense in a sense. But either way, give me the Bills to win this game by 10, cover the spread while starting the season 2-0, heading in to a short week against the Miami Dolphins. And along with Allen having a big day, I think Keon Coleman's going to go over 75 yards. Dalton Kincaid will break 50 yards on 5+ receptions. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this passing game has to offer this week. But give me the Bills 27-17 and to improve to 2-0. But that's going to do it on a quick show late this Saturday night. Thanks for all who joined me. We'll be back after the game on Sunday with a review of what hopefully amounts to a Bills win over their AFC East rival. But please like, share, and subscribe. Also, check out my Substack where I'll be providing my 5 takes on this one tomorrow morning. Also, plenty of coverage for Buffalo Bills on SI. So thanks, everybody in the comments. Please head on over to YouTube, like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.